Welcome everyone to the IMC, the International Mentoring Community Mentoring Lounge. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, Mountain Standard Time, and we're off to the races. Welcome aboard, Doug. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Education and Certification, and Doug does the work of?
I am the Director of Practice and Outreach.
Great. And today's show is about felt mentoring or mentoring using a felt lens, depends how you want to look at it. It's about the soul and the whole of extraordinary mentoring or the soul and the whole of serving as a mentor, depending on which way you want to look at it. But we are going to add in between soul and whole the concepts of spirituality. So we're going to bring a connection between soul, spirituality, and whole as it applies to this world of mentoring, all things mentoring. And we're going to sort of lay it up in the following way. We're going to take a look at what is mentoring and serving as a mentor, just to establish a baseline for us. And then what we're going to do is move through a conversation about the soul, spirituality, and Wholverse, and as it links to a mentoring and serving as a mentor. And we will conclude with some characteristics of what felt mentoring would sort of smell like, taste like, feel like, if you want to use those words. And in a sense, we're just going to unpack, unfold, deepen, enrich this topic. And we may or may not go deep into some aspects. We may go a little bit shallow. We may go wide in some other aspects. It just sort of see what happens here. And if people have questions they want to ask or comments they want to make, we'll pick up on those and see if we can't weave them in as well. And at the end, Doug is going to give us an answer to a Quora question. And if you're not familiar with Quora, Doug will explain about that afterwards. So let's get into it, Doug, and let's see what happens, okay?
Sounds good.
All righty. So what we're going to do is take a look at mentoring, extraordinary mentoring, and just sort of take a look at those statements. So, Doug, you want to give us a sense of what IMC defines mentoring to be, and add a little bit more about what we mean by extraordinary mentoring.
So the definition of mentoring is a two-way trusted relational arrangement between a mentor and a mentee, where the concept is to be able to help both learn and grow on a personal and professional basis. So the key things to sort of unpack out of that is trusted relationship, and it's relational based, and it's all about promoting or helping somebody with personal and professional growth.
And the extraordinary mentoring, that continuum, want to just share a bit about that for those who haven't heard us before?
So in the research that we've done, we've looked at mentoring from a number of variables, but we've looked at it from the aspect of a continuum of mentoring. So mentor, good mentor, and extraordinary mentor. So that's an extraordinary mentor would be somebody who would mentor other mentors. It would be somebody that has a deeper, richer mentoring practice that they're engaged with today.
Yeah, now those words deeper and richer are going to play out quite a bit in today's presentation. And I think if you hold on to those words, you'll sort of see how they're going to connect with some of the other words we're going to go over. I'd just like to add a couple of things here about mentoring. It's an educating approach, and it's certainly linked to leading. And I think of something like facilitating is linked to managing. So we bring this sort of connection between the two of them. And I do that simply because in my practice, I'm what I consider a facilitative mentor. I use those in combination, sort of like the two ends of a stick, facilitator, mentor. and work with both of them when I'm interacting with others. And it's very much, for me, mentoring is about serving as a guide on the ride. I like that phrase. It's in one of the books that I've written. And I think it really illustrates this notion of what a mentor is doing in this definition that Doug just shared with you, and in that continuum that he also helped you understand. And so when we move into the world of serving as a mentor, to serve as a mentor, it's something to be said for about performing duties or services for another. So this guide on the ride, this trusted relationship, this mentor is there to be of use, to be of help, to be suggesting events for the mentee. And it means that they have to be very attentive. They have to attend to the mentee and to themselves, because it is two-way, all right? And there's a phrasing that I use in my work, and it's consider, convert, and complete. And I believe in a mentoring connection is you want to consider what's going to be talked about. You want to convert, in other words, have a conversation about that, but get to a point of some kind of completion, as some action outcome that you're going to take. But it may not unfold in the same way that coaching does. And we have a coaching and mentoring video in our series. If you want to go back to the YouTube channel for International Mentoring Community, you can find that video as well. Now, this notion of serving on that continuum, I actually went and did a little digging into the word mentor. And you could frame it as mentor or mentor, depending on how you wanted to play with the T, okay? And I always think of that T as about transition. So when you're mentoring, there's some transition that's going to take place between where the mentee enters as well as the mentor, and where you get on the other end of these conversations, this mentoring arrangement, both for the mentee and mentor, something has happened. There's been some transition. And with the ment, M-E-N-T, and the or, I just want to make mention is that it sort of expresses, ment means to express some kind of result or action. And that's to serve as a mentor in this case. Or it may suggest that as if mentoring doesn't fit, then maybe you have to go to another form of educating approach. So I like that ment, M-E-N-T, and then or is another way to describe it. But there's also mentor, because that's the sort of the original spelling of it. That's how people refer to it. But I thought what was interesting was men, okay, adult male, I get that, males, but tor, I did not realize this, but tor means high rock or lofty hill. And I went, that's kind of interesting. So mentor is someone who helps you get to the top to move you along your journey, all right? But in this case, it's about get to the top. Now, it's not always about men doing it, because we know that women mentor as well. And that's interesting, is because if you actually dig back into the history of mentor is the name of the educator of Odysseus's son, Telemachus, all right, in the Homer's Odyssey, all right? So mentor was the educator to Odysseus's son. But if you actually dig back in there, mentor was actually the goddess Athena. Mm-hmm. And Athena was in male form called mentor. So when we go back into looking at this use of this term, it's meant to be holistic, all right? I've had some people come up to me and says, we should change the term mentor out because it refers to men. And I keep going, hang on a minute. All right. Unless we have another word to replace it, mentor does have a deep and rich history in its use. And as we apply it into the world of mentoring. So again, I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And that plays itself out from this notion of soul, spirituality, and whole perspective. Or the short form of that is soul, spirit, and whole. Okay, so that's how you'll probably hear me speak about it. So what does soul, spirit, and whole have to do with mentoring? And let's unpack it a little bit and have a little bit of fun with this. Now, I'm going to declare, and I think Doug will join me, it's not that we are specialists about soul, spirit, and whole. There's other people who understand this in a much more deeper, richer ways. Yet I think that both Doug and I, when we get down to helping you understand how soul, spirit, and whole comes out through mentoring, through our practices of mentoring, I think you'll appreciate the way that we're going to look at it here with you. So, from a soul perspective, it's very much about looking at the immortal or immaterial essence of a human being. It's sort of looking at it from not that which is physical right here, material, but there's something else that's going on inside, and that meeting of other souls and being able to have that unfold. And that's where spirituality comes in, and this notion of spirit. Spirituality is about being concerned with the human soul as opposed to the material things. Now, this is important because you sort of, well, isn't that what you just said about soul? Yes. However, this is an interpretation I'm going to add. Spirituality is sort of like the field in which these souls get to meet and interact. So I want to give that imagery to you, is that there is this field. We can't quite touch it. We can't grab a hold of it, but it's a place in which our souls interact. In a material form, we often will say is there are systems in the field. There's a chap by the name of Kurt Lewin many years ago talked about systems in field. And he says that the systems are the human constructs that come out of the field. So in trying to understand this, we can't quite touch everything. We bring and create human constructs called systems out of it. So in some ways, our soul, even though it is about the immortal and the immaterial, it is like a human construct that we're connecting with in this field of spirituality. I hope that lands for you, folks. If not, in your comments and add to it. But it's a very helpful way for me when I linked it up to mentoring, which we will get to here in a little bit. Now, the other thing about it is the notion of spirituality. There is a very strong connection to religion. And in our presentation today, we are connecting spirituality without a religious focus. All right. If you do searches into the internet, you'll find spiritual mentoring, which is very much connected in most of the what comes up, the links that come up are connected to religion, spirituality, mentoring, and religion. We're not doing that today. Okay. We're looking at sort of this spirituality and a much more open, without religion boundaries or relationships to it. So we wanted to make sure that you understood that as we move forward. Now, this word whole and what I call Wholverse, all right, which is a new word. I get that. Okay. I brought it forward in my work and my company. I have a company, as Doug has his, and we came together to be the co-founders of IMC. So we bring both those business relationships into this as well. But Wholeverse was to replace universe. So instead of uni being one verse, and I sort of think of one conversation, Wholeverse was meant to bring the whole, everything into the conversations. So it was a slightly different way of looking at it. So it's about the whole person, whole situation, the whole of the wholes. All right. Now, you might find it spelled Holism, whereas I would spell it holism with a W. And I say that because holism with an H only, to me, is, remember I mentioned about this human's construct and the field? I believe that holism that way is sort of a human construct. It's sort of a formal dialogue. I'm using holism in sort of a, here we go, folks, a galactic plus consideration, that way out there, and bringing that in beyond our own galaxies is the understanding of this whole of the wholes. And that's how I'm bringing it in. So again, this notion of soul, spirituality, spirit, Wholeverse, our definitions here are not meant to be, that's it, folks, listen to us, follow us. That's not what we're getting at. It's just to give you some sense of some definitions. And now what we want to do is link it into the world of mentoring. And this is where Doug and I, from our own practice, are going to bring it forward and give you some examples of how this might play itself out. So on this notion of mentoring, to serve as a mentor, about a guide on the ride, there's a lot more to mentoring than that physical mental interactions. There's something that's going on in that field as well. And something that I have learned is how you mentor and serving as a mentor is a consideration of your story of soul, spirit, and whole. And it's what makes a difference. That's what I found, because in conversations I've had, is the way in which I go about doing mentoring is not exactly the same way that Doug goes about his mentoring, or anyone else that I talk to, but you get a sense of the soul whole, right, and the spirit component when you have a conversation with someone. Because I know that this notion of the soul is difficult to touch. I get that, okay? But you know what? You get a sense when you know someone is present with their soul there. You know that notion of the old soul? You might use that phrase, gee, that person's a really old soul. So you have a sense of, you know when it's there, and you do have a sense when it's not there. Okay. You may not be able to grab it, touch it, do everything you want with it, but it's something that's there. And I share with you, as I was doing some digging, there is a new Pixar movie, and you can look it up. It's called Soul, and it's about a musician. But one of the underlying themes in it is mentoring. Okay. And I would certainly recommend to go look at it. It's just recently out. And I think you will see this really wonderful thread, string, chord storyline of mentoring in it. And I think you'll get a little bit about what Doug and I are trying to share here. Okay. Now, the other thing I would do before I get deeper into serving as a mentor and the notion of soul, I like to just make this reference, okay? Unfortunately, we are living in a time of feeling at odds with our soul. There is a lot of noise out there that is sort of getting in the way of a soul approach, understanding our soul's contribution. And I know there's a lot of people coaching now in this world of soul, and making a connection. And I'm starting to find more mentors speaking about that as well, and bringing that to the surface. But this noise that we're in, all right, sometimes clouds puts a brain fog there that disconnects us. And I just want to acknowledge that and say to you is that the way that we at IMC go about doing what we're doing is to get rid of that fog, to bring that closeness to this notion of soul and spirit and the whole. So, Doug, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into what it means to serve as a mentor and connect it to the soul. But is there anything you want to add at this point in time that would round out anything from your perspective?
The only thing from a practice of mentoring perspective is that whether you are somebody who practices spirituality or religion or whatever, you still need to be just mindful of any telltale signs that may be an area of concern or distress for the person that you're mentoring. And that's why we're sharing a lot of this information and material with you today, is to give you the tools so that when you do find yourself in those situations, number one, you'll hopefully be able to understand why, and number two, be able to navigate your way where you need to go, and do that with your mentee.
Yeah, and Doug, if you remember one of the other shows that we've done sort of in the past, like last year, someone brought up, the notion, and you're hinting at it here, but the notion of the bias of the religion that gets into a generic conversation, a more open conversation. I appreciate the religion in terms of if it's about a religious topic, but there is this notion of sometimes we can bring bias in, all right, from any form of religion, okay, that you might be attached to. So you make a great point. Thanks for reminding us of that. And all of a sudden you got me jumping back into that video at that point in time. So that's great. Well, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In mentoring, to serve as a mentor, if you allow the presence of soul to arrive, it's a great present in that presence. And if you just let it come to you, let those feelings enter into your being, into your conversation, and be open to how that shows up for the mentee with you as well. There's a phrase that Doug and I will use, is that your gifts are in you to gift. So the gift of mentoring is in you to gift. All right. And therefore, your soul and its stories and its connections, and the mentee's soul and stories and connections are like gifts that you give each other. All right. And that's just wonderful, because I know there's this genius that we're born with, and then we interact with the scenius, right? That's another word about into the situation, into the scene, all right, with the mentee. But the mentee has this genius that they're adding into the scenius with you as the mentor. And this word scenius, I bring it out is because it's sort of like the scenius is sort of the place in which this mentoring takes place. All right. And I want to bring that to the surface, because sometimes we just talk about mentor, mentee, and there's an arrangement, but there's something that happens between, all right, and together and beyond with the mentor and the mentee. And becoming aware of that is like becoming aware of the soul of the interaction, the spirit that becomes present, this whole aspect of what unfolds. And I believe most people know when that's not there in a mentoring relationship. But when it is there is a gift there for both. And I call it scenius. That's one of the ways in which I refer to it. Now, here's some interesting ways in which your soul expresses itself. Okay. One is authenticity. Hey, this is me. Okay. This is what you get. You get a hand waving person who presents, sometimes leans in, shares, got a beard, right? This is me. I don't present any masks or anything like that. And that's how a mentor I would encourage to show up, right, Doug?
Yeah.
Authentic is the way in which to be, right? And the notion of when you're mentoring is when the soul is present, seems to be this depth and width and breadth that becomes apparent. We call it deeper, richer. All right. We use words like that. And I know one of the words that Doug uses a lot is relatability. Right, Doug? That's important, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what's going on. Now, here's a couple of other interesting ways, and I hadn't thought about it before. And it was when I was doing a bit of research for this, even though I do it, and Doug does it, is that from a soul perspective, there's a bit more of an arts infusion. So it's not just about words and the auditory, it's also about our facial expression. It may even be about asking someone to draw something, right? It's about how might we use metaphors? How might we use music? There's a certain arts infusion because there's times when I'll go, geez, there's a piece of music I think really lends itself to this situation at this point in time. It's sort of like I mentioned, go watch the Pixar movie about soul and see what you think, okay? And that arts infused, I hadn't really seen that before, but yet it's something that I do, okay? And again, making mention is that the soul touching the sort of field of spirituality and reaching in and sort of bringing some of that in. But I think spirit sort of says there's something we want to bring to you and being aware of that as well. That's sort of two-way component as well. And I won't rule out from a soul perspective, dreams and the sort of imagination that awakens for you. I have certainly started to pay a lot more attention when I'm mentoring, is that there's certain sort of an intuitive, I think you need to make mention of this, and I sort of go, okay, do I, don't I? And often I do it, right? So what about you from a dreams and imagination point of view? This awakening, does that fall into your practice a lot, or is there something you do or don't do around that? And folks, I didn't prompt Doug for this one, so I just wanted to see what he has to say.
Well, I know that the whole aspect of dreams and all that whole story, number one, it certainly is beneficial if you can experience that yourself first, so that you get to kind of understand what it's excuse me, what it's all about, and then you're able to intuitively understand or be able to determine that the mentee that you're working with is obviously having some experiences that they're maybe perhaps reluctant to share, and your job is now to sort of ask questions to guide them to a place where they'll be more comfortable, a safe place where they'll share some of that. But I do, and a large part of what I have been experiencing is my reflection of my lived experience, number one, and number two is dealing with my my grief. So, and that's where I find that whole soul spirituality has been taken to a whole new level because of that.
Right. And you have personal experience with grief and a recent situation that's happened to you. And folks, I'd like to share with you is that from an ethics point of view, the word caring, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, you'd probably see Doug's picture beside it, okay? And the reason being is that this caring through soul, through mentoring, is a very strong Again, I'll use the words thread, string, cord, rope to his storyline because of his work in the mental health area. Is that fair in terms of, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a word, well, two words, but it's an interesting spelling difference, okay? For Doug, a lot of people from a mental health point of view, he's meeting who are scared. Would that be true, Doug? They're
Yeah.
scared somehow, okay? But if you flip the C with the A, flip them around, you end up with sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that what Doug does, and I'll let him answer this if this is true or not, I believe because of Doug's deep practice, this caring ethic that he has, this work that he's doing in the mental health area, he's bringing a sacred approach, a soul, spirit, whole approach for people who are scared to sacred, and he's allowing that experience to happen for both of them.
Yep, bang on. Yeah, definitely.
Okay? Yeah. So from my own practice, I understand that there's this sort of the wildness of soul. And I like this just because this notion of the wild around us, the whole of nature and all that, we use terms like rewilding, bringing ourselves back to nature, connecting spiritually with nature. And I do a lot of mentoring connected with nature and assisting people to make that reconnection, to rewild. And where it plays itself out for me is there's a lot of people, because they haven't had that connection, I get them to experience a causal relationship with nature through the mentoring, okay? And what my job is, my service, is to move the S to the other side of you to get this casual relationship, okay? So where I'm playing, switching the S around you, all right, Doug is looking at the C around A, okay? And I thought that that was a kind of interesting way for us to take a look at things. So I'm looking to shift you. Doug is attempting to see A. Now, if you're Canadian, you'll understand the humor in this one. Eh? You got that point? It's sort of like to see the, oh, okay, I see that point. And I think that's what Doug is doing in his work. And that's what I'm doing in my work. And that's what connects us to soul and spirituality and the whole in kind of a fun way. And I thought that I would bring that up. Okay. So here's just a little bit deeper dive, and then we're going to take a look at the concept of felt and linking it to mentoring. From a mentoring point of view, there is this notion of mentoring comes from lived experience. Doug's mentioned that already. It's tapping into that gift. It's a two-way trusted connection. There's a collaborative conversation that takes place there. And therefore, it lends itself to opening to this notion of spirit, okay, and soul and whole. And we would, I think, really, and feel to mention to you is that you can approach mentoring through your five senses, or you can approach mentoring through multi-sensory. Open up the intuition, open up the imagination, open up the different other ways in which to connect with the whole, all right? Because that adds more flavor and feeling to your service as a mentor. And let me use an example here. Like a musician who connects with the soul, spirit, and whole in the sense of the flow to find their spark, their muse, I think how you serve as a mentor connecting with soul, spirit, and whole is another form of the whole which I sort of refer to as the great wonderment evolving. Okay. The extraordinary wonderment, all right, of this evolving connection that you have with your mentee. And there's a lot of flow that goes on there. So I just wanted to make that last little connection with this notion of soul, spirit, and whole with mentoring. But what we want to do is jump into the world now of felt. Now, this word's kind of interesting, and felt mentoring. It's kind of interesting. Felt is also a fabric. It's about fabric making, and it actually is taking wool and warm water and pressure, agitating all of those together, and it forms a fabric that's called felt. And we know it's from a felt clothing, felt hat. It can be made up to make a felt tent. All right. It's quite an ancient way of making this clothing and all that. And that's where felt comes from. And there's different kind of felts. But what we're referring to more is the past tense of feeling. To feel is the felt that you have, the felt within what's taking place. And it sort of, okay, I felt this happen. Okay. But what it does is, can I use it as a way in which to bring the future? This notion, if I want to feel it and have the feltness of this future today, how might I bring it forward? And that's what we wanted to share with you today. Okay. Now, what's interesting here, from a felt mentoring point of view, we understand what mentoring is. We understand felt is about the feelings component of this, is that there are certain characteristics that we can associate with felt mentoring. And I think it's through those characteristics you get a sense of why this feeling, and drawing this feeling in from a soul, spirit, whole perspective is really important to sort of create this sort of sandbox of mentoring where you can get in there and play. Okay. And what we're going to do is to share, while there's quite a few, the ones I'm going to highlight, there's 10 of them. Okay. I'm just going to go through each one, and I think you'll get a sense of what we're talking about here in terms of this felt mentoring, this feelings aspect of mentoring, and how serving as a mentor in this felt way is important. So the first characteristic I will give you is you, the mentor, is you got to be easily observable. You got to be there. You got to, right? You have to be able to be seen. I have seen some mentors, like in a virtual capacity, not have their screen on. If you're going to be in the virtual world, you as a mentor have to be on screen. I don't think you can mandatory or demand that the mentee has to be there, okay, because for whatever reason, maybe it's not safe for them at that point in time, but you would want to encourage it. But you as a mentor, you have to be observable. Your body, people have to see your body language. And that's why I'm just going to make a distinction here, is this, if this is all you saw of me as a mentor, that's not as helpful as being able to see more of me. Okay. So the notion of ensure that you as a mentor is easily observable. The second point would be is lean into more share and show than tell and sell. Okay. Again, Doug, we've talked about this in another one in terms of storytelling and story sharing. Remember, we had that one that went on as well. All right. And do you want to talk a little bit about why it's important to engage with the personal and professional levels in mentoring and do it from a felt perspective?
Well, typically what I've seen is when I'm mentoring somebody, and if I head us down the path of looking at the professional growth first, that I will run into obstacles and barriers to having any success with the mentoring relationship. But if I come at it from the aspect of wanting to work with a person to deal with their personal growth, not their professional, but their personal growth, I can help them remove any obstacles or barriers that they may have, and then begin the journey on the career development, the professional development piece, then beginning that journey then, because we no longer will have those obstacles or barriers to deal with.
Right. So this notion of personal professional levels is a very important storyline, folks, for mentoring. So the next one I would offer to you is staying found in the conversations and interactions. Yes, you have to be observable, but then you have to stay found, because there's sometimes that I'll see people who are mentors and they're mentoring and they're looking off and going, yeah, okay, all right. You don't know what they're looking off. So when you observe it, it feels kind of awkward. And therefore, stay found so that you're not off. Now, there's often, folks, you'll see me, even in these presentations, I'll just look off to the side and come back. I'm a visual learner, so sometimes what I have to do is go look at my imaginary whiteboard and pull a connection down, and it's a reminder for me. And other people, they're full on, they're looking right in the hair, and they're having a conversation with you. So again, it's stay found, whatever way that is, so that people can appreciate what that's about. The next thing is to listen responsively and attend consciously. I think I got it right. I sometimes mix them up, okay? So listen responsively and attend consciously. So in listening, you're doing it from a place of responding. In terms of attending, you're doing it from a place of consciousness. All right. Those are important. And because they both allow your awareness of when feelings come to the surface. Because if all of a sudden you feel as though you need to respond like now without sort of going, oh, just before I do that, or if you haven't been consciously and you sort of go, oh, can you go over that point again? Feelings come out. And sometimes those feelings can confuse, and they might even get in the way and maybe even misinterpreted. And therefore, from a felt mentoring point of view, make sure that you listen responsibly and attend consciously. Okay? Celebrate the successes of the mentees in their words. Sometimes with mentors, they celebrate it in their words. If you can, get back into the heart of the words of the mentee. That's so important. Then the mentee feels it, all right? And that's what the felt aspect's about. A couple more to go. Weave the community of two together and more. So remember is that mentoring, yes, mentor-mentee, but it's also the ripple effect that goes with that. Invest in the well-being and well-living of the mentee and yourself in terms of what you're doing. All right. So put some time and effort, and might even be money, into it. Not to say that the mentor has to pay for the mentee's well-being. I'm not saying that. It's more for yourself as a mentor. And certainly demonstrate the respect. It goes back to the notion of you as a mentor and the mentee are genius. And you come together into the scenius of mentoring. And each of you has knowledge, skills, and attitude. Each of you are ready, able, and willing to engage. So respect those. And sometimes the mentee isn't quite there because guess what? The mentees asked you for this conversation, this collaborative conversation, so that they can get some of those insights and ideas and interpretations for themselves. And the last thing that I would share with you is, from a felt mentoring point of view, find the ways in which to bring the following 5 synthesized feelings into the mentoring: gratitude, presence, inspiration, enthusiasm, and certainty. You bring those into it, then you are having this notion of mentoring, all right? This notion of mentoring that is felt. And that's why, as I reflect upon everything that I've talked about today, I'm not sure, all right, and I'm going to have a conversation with Doug about this. I'm not sure that we'll go forward saying felt mentoring. I think we might going mentoring that is felt, all right? I think that's something we'll have a conversation about, okay? Because sometimes felt mentoring is a shortcut for mentoring that is felt. And I think mentoring that is felt is actually a better way of doing it. And I would ask all of you who are listening, and do you agree or disagree? All right, share in the comments, because that's where we can learn from you, because that's where you also subscribe to the channel, and that's certainly something that we ask of you. So that sort of comes to a conclusion, this notion of felt mentoring, or mentoring that is felt. And Doug, as we always do, why don't you share the Quora question and the Quora answer, and then we'll get ready to take us out. Over to you.
Okay. So just Quora is a website that you can go to and pose questions on a number of different topics, one of which is mentoring and business mentoring, and somebody will respond back. And so that somebody could very well be me, where I get email notifications of somebody posting a question looking for an answer to something that is mentoring or business mentoring related. And so that's kind of the gist behind where this all came from. And so one of the questions that has been posed is, as a supervisor, as a supervisor or a boss, how do you handle a worker who has issues at work? And my response was, what some organizations have done is to bring in an external mentor to work with the employee to initiate behavioral changes for the positive. In all the situations that I have been involved in, we have been successful in each and every one. In some cases, the issues were personal, which translated into workplace challenges. In other situations, it was all about providing tools to assist in a positive behavior going forward. One thing to keep in mind is that it is not always the worker who needs guidance, but it could also be the supervisor or the boss.
And the mentor.
And the mentor could be.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, thanks for that. And thanks for the explanation about Quora for those who may not understand. So, folks, we're coming to a close here, a little bit longer one than we normally do. But this was a deep and rich, right? It was a soul, spirit, whole collaborative connection with you. We certainly encourage you to subscribe, comment, let us know what's happening for you as this unfolds. And even if you disagree with something that we said, we'd love to hear that as well, because that's what allows us to enliven, embody, enact this notion of mentoring and serving as a mentor. And we're always open to learning. I think that's something that Doug and I both so appreciate about each other and for ourselves. So with that, and I just checked, there's no asks or comments anywhere that I can find. So I think that will bring us to a close. And so, as usual, because I do the intros, Doug gets to do the closing. So, Doug, you get to close us out.
Well, what I want to do is I want to encourage everybody to actually take a look at that Pixar movie Soul, because there is a lot of great information that's in there, and the animation is good too. So I hope you'll take the time to go in and watch that, and have a great day.